Sorry about that. I had to eat breakfast, and my dog was annoying me earlier. As you can see, it's around 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm being driven crazy by this dog. Bloodhounds can be gentle giants, but they are annoying. Now, as you can see, back to where is at. Mandalorians are a race that have been in a serious pain to defeat time and time again, even by themselves. They're a warrior culture that split between numerous factions and it's called houses. Their culture has been in increasing decline since long before the Clone Wars even began. Mandalorians have been so accustomed to fighting that when they can't fight an opponent, they tend to fight each other for dominance, becoming in every way a warriors that just don't know how to do anything except annihilate. For as a result of it, Mandalorians were forced to basically have nothing but a desert-covered world. After the very violent nature of their people had caused their world to nearly die out, and their people along with it, Mandalorians endured in domed city is to survive. Embracing a new philosophy of absolute pacifism, to ensure that they did not kill themselves off in the process. With these pacifists becoming known as the new Mandalorians, who, despite the name, still embraced much of the old Mandalorians' culture and tradition, and they just refused to be violent and only fighting in self-defense. But as a result, corruption and for those like Prime Minister Almec got greedy and arrogant and used the people to their own advantage. With old Mandalorian and Remnant and being exiled to the Mandalorian homeworld's moon of Concordia, from which they became known as the Death Watch, a terror organization, and that sought to restore Mandalore to its ancient warrior culture, but in the process made them corrupt and arrogant, siding with the Confederacy, that it would eventually betray them in the Clone Wars. Hold on. And again. Waylon, will you quit whining? I'm getting tired of you constantly whining. And I'm trying to make a video here. Again, sorry. I just don't know why he keeps whining today. When the Mandalorians of Death Watch couldn't gain any support from the Confederacy, they they were forced to abandon the Confederacy, and Pre Vizsla, a leader of the Death Watch movement, and was branded as a result of it. As the fascist leader of Death Watch, he he continued his mission to ensure that Death Watch would overthrow Mandalore and restore their culture. And they did, albeit briefly. For Mandalore would be plunged into another civil war shortly after Death Watch won, with Maul taking over much of Death Watch and creating in the Shadow Collective a criminal syndicate of numerous criminal enterprises, with Mandalorian serving as the capital of the collective. Pre Vizsla was killed by Maul in combat, and he earned the Darksaber from Pre Vizsla as a result of it. While groups like the Night Owls would immediately betray and abandon Maul as soon as such a thing was seen. To Mandalorians, no outsider shall rule Mandalore. In Bo-Katan's own words, never. No outsider will ever rule Mandalore. As the Mandalorians quickly delved faster and faster into civil war, it was only thanks to the help of the Galactic Republic instituting the Siege of Mandalore during the last days of the Clone Wars that Mandalore would be freed from Maul's tyranny, Prime Minister Alme, and killed, and Bo-Katan being made regent of Mandalore to rebuild her people free of outside rule. Now I mentioned something called the Darksaber. I'm gonna need a minute to find it in this giant as hell a bit here. A lightsaber made by Tar Vizsla, Pre Vizsla's ancestor. The very first Mandalorian ever inducted into the Jedi Order. And with it, constructed a lightsaber unique, for it's a one-of-a-kind lightsaber among them all. Creating a black blade that can cut through anything except for other lightsabers, energy blades, and Beskar armor. It was decreed by the House Vizsla after they reclaimed it from the Jedi Temple at the end of the Old Republic, as it was called, the fall of the Old Republic, that whoever wins the sword in combat it is dubbed is the rightful ruler of all of Mandalore. Maul earned it by striking Vizsla down and in combat. Sabine Wren obtained the Darksaber from Maul 19 years after the Shadow Collective collapsed, and would use it in several battles during the early time of the Mandalorian Civil War, or during the Galactic Civil War, but would give it to Bo-Katan Kryze, who was a much wiser leader than Sabine ever is gonna be. For despite her very brief rule before the Empire conquered her world, she had the wisdom of a true ruler. But she would give it to Gideon to try and ensure her people did not fall in the night of 1,000 tears, which was where Mandalore itself was bombed by Imperial forces, likely occurring in between 4 ABY and 5 ABY, sometime before or after the Battle of Endor, and well before the Battle of Jakku, in which the war officially ended. Mandalore was then scattered for years on end. Decades of fighting each other and outsiders would eventually lead to the Empire's uncontested victory, and they would claim a Mandalore for themselves. Just checking and to see new bits and pieces I haven't seen on this website yet. Since then, Moff Gideon has held the dark saber until 09 ABY, in which he lost in combat to Din Djarin, who tried to give it to Bo-Katan, but she would not accept it the same way she did from Sabine in only a decade earlier. Paz Vizsla would later challenge Din Djarin for the saber, but it lost, and it maintained into his possession until Bo-Katan and used it in Mandalore, or down near the mines, and would reclaim ownership of it. Eventually, during the reconquest of Mandalore, reclamation of Mandalore, whatever you want to call it, the saber was destroyed in combat, but Mandalore would be reclaimed. Mandalorians have stubbornly survived death time and time again as a people. And though we don't know much of Mandalore and the aftermath of this, since the Star Wars canon is still being expanded on, and even now in Disney. Waylon, will you shut up? As both Castron Dune and Din Djarin said, in truth, Mandalorian isn't a race.
Mandalorian isn't a race.
It's a creed.